So now, that evening, I was going to talk about, so I received a question from Daniel Molenda, I think it was, from the email. And the question was very vague. Where do you get your stuff, and where do you buy your stuff, and where should I buy 80s and 90s clothing? So it did not really precise. It does not really mean anything, because it could mean anything. I replied a long mail to that person, but now I'm going to make a video about that and the difficulties, or should I say extreme difficulties into finding stuff. So first of all, I will only concentrate on what I'm doing, because at least I'm a profound expert on that decade and that society, which is British, especially upper class, counting the upper middle classes there, and 1890s. I'm not going to the whole other world, including America, or especially, I don't know, places which are dressed similar, but still it would have been made differently, such as in Turkey, Greece, France, whatever, and other decades, especially past the 1890s. And obviously men's clothing, I know nothing about women's clothing. And simply say that because of the smallness of people then, and the rarity of at least men's clothing, whichever category, prior to 1920, when it's really mass production using machines and not mass production using hands, was at full bloom, the difficulties are enormous. So let's say for me, I've gained a lot of weight. I've gained 10 kilograms in the past 2 years. So I'm now 65 kilograms and 1.78 meters. And most Westerners, because are actually way taller than I and way bigger. And already I am at the limit of it being still possible to do. So if you are, whichever height you are, but if one is, whatever one's height, but if one is more than 80 kilograms, or if one is very short, perhaps 90 kilograms with very fat, then for a very short person, 90 kilograms is grand max, probably 80 to 90, and or if one is thin to very skinny, if one is very, very skinny and willing to wear more or less tight things, then one could go up to 1 meter 83, 85, grand absolute max, I would say. I'm not even sure. Because it is very difficult finding things the right length for me, which are not too short, and I'm only 1.78 meters. So, let one say one is a European male, or Western male, or whatever male. A lot of them are way bigger than I, or even if to have not more weight, to have a bigger bone structure. And surely if there's one thing that can't be reduced is the bone structure, how to reduce one's shoulders or structural chest using a corset is impossible. One would have to remove ribs or whatever. And so that's the case. If one desires even to simply dress like in the 1890s and not before, which would be even more difficult, well, it has to be made. And so now that I will first answer for the vast majority of people, especially into that, which are usually Western, usually British, and in the British are some of the biggest persons on earth. And also obese. They're very obese now. They're following Floridas in America, and to have the most obese country now, and to have very tall, and most men into that are actually young, about my age here, or at least below 40 or 50. Whereby most men below 50 in Britain, at least, are quite taller than I. So then it has to be made. Because apart from finding one shirt or one frock coat every 3 years, one should not find anything that actually fits. And on top of that is wearable. So it has to be made. Now, if one desires proper accuracy, it becomes extremely difficult, and that's the reason for which I said it has to be made. No shops produce anything which is anything really accurate, even clothes, even with regard going into the absolute of the absolute still. None of them actually have proper dye for their cloth. So now, I only know a handful of tailors that are at least willing to do it. The cloths they use usually are not very accurate. So I think there's a place producing cloth still on 1880s. I think some of the machines go back to the 60s, 1860s. I do not know if there's machines that still operate, there's looming machines that still operated using the same fuel, in other words, coal. But let us say I'm not even using coal and to replace the engines with electric power. At least the looming process should be the same. In other words, as many threads per yard, per yard, which was much denser. That's the reason for which even a thick wool of today, even a heavy, like let us say a 15 ounce to the yard wool of today, will not be the same than a 50 ounces wool of per yard of 1920 or before, because they had less threads per inch because the machines were not as refined. And so they also drape differently, and upon close inspection they look completely different. So it has to be loomed on a machine using the same thing. And apparently some tell us on YouTube, I'm not sure if this is still true or if it was ever true, that in the north of, I think in Sheffield, they still have that in England. So at least if we wish to do British in 1890s, that would be accurate cloth for the looming itself. For the dye, they will not be dyed the same way, because these things are banned. So I'm almost certain they will not be dyed using the same processes, which obviously involved, especially for bright colors, a lot of mercury. Not arsenic, it was called aniline dye, invented in 1856. And all the processes using mercury and all the things, the ammonia and all. So it will not be dyed the same. But that does not really show as much or show at all. It starts maybe showing through years, because using especially arsenic, even mercury and all, the dyes would impregnate or tattoo the cloth, the yarn, much better than usually the modern chemicals used today. All the things they had before the 1830s, which were really the worst way to tattoo clothing, which was really done using fruits and natural things, but in that case the dye is the least permanent. And the most permanent manner is related to it, not the modern way, but the in-between way, the chemical way of the 19th century. So it will not age the same way, but it sort of is okay. And you will not find anyone. So even forget the dye. And for the shirts, for the cotton linen, there is, I learned from Kelly Allison, a luxurious cloth maker in Italy, which still is owned by the same family, operating in the same what is it called, warehouse, whatever, in the same place, the factory. And for some of them most high-end, you have to get the most high-end cloths they do, which are either linen or cotton. So it would be the most expensive cloth, but it will still cost less than a cheap cloth which you have a man make a custom-made shirt out of. But for those high-end cloths, they still use a machine that they invented back in the mid-1850s, which is, I think, a partly hand-powered machine and partly water-powered machine, which looms the fabric exactly the same manner, because it dates from the era, and I think the machine is intact. So the problem also you might tell me is they did not have that cloth in Britain, but they might have imported it. At least it is historically accurate. And I think also for some of their cloths, also if it is white, it is not bleached, it is simply bleached, and bleach has existed since before the Middle Ages. So that is fine. But for colored shirts, for these high-end grade shirts, are dyed using natural pigmentation. So now the problem with that, first of all, in the 1890s, most things were dyed even for the upper classes using chemicals, but only the chemicals have been banned. But obviously, because these natural processes, i.e. using fruit extracts and or plant and or earth extracts, date back to the antiquity or even before, it will still be historically accurate for the 1890s England, but only not really contextually accurate, although I'm sure some well-to-do persons, especially if one is aimed to do upper class, would have desired to say, oh look, I still have something naturally dyed because it takes more time and is more costly, although it will not last as long to dye, but never mind. So then these are the only places I know where to get